Sign this check over to your brother, or you're not walking out of here. My mother didn't say happy birthday. She simply slid the $500,000 check, my grandfather's gift to me, across the table like a ransom demand. When I didn't reach for the pen, my father walked to the door and locked it. Then he turned his phone toward me. On the screen was a photo of our front porch, taken from a black car sitting in the driveway at that very moment. "The loan sharks are outside," he said. "Clara, you pay Brandon's debt, or they come in." Before I tell you what I did with that pen, think about this. What's the worst gift a family member has ever given you? I glanced at the locked door, then back at my parents. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. In my profession, when you find a discrepancy in the ledger, you don't scream. You investigate. And right now, the discrepancy sat in the middle of the table. A stale, store-bought cupcake with a single unlit candle. For a split second, I wasn't 29. I was 10 again, sitting at this same table, squeezing my eyes shut and wishing my parents would look at me the way they looked at Brandon. Just once, I wanted to be their daughter, not the invisible tuition fund or future retirement plan. I studied Linda's white knuckles gripping the check and Gregory's eyes flicking nervously toward the window where the black car waited. They weren't here to celebrate my life. They were here to harvest it to save their son. In my mind, I leaned forward and blew out that 10-year-old's candle. The smoke didn't smell like wax. It smelled like something burning. The daughter in me died in that chair. The forensic auditor took over. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I leaned back and slowed my breathing. Fear makes people careless, and I needed to be the sharpest mind in the room. "If I sign this check," I said calmly, "Brandon will be dead by morning." Linda blinked. "What are you talking about? It's money. It saves him." "Mother, you don't just transfer $500,000. The moment I endorse this to Brandon, the bank files a suspicious activity report. Anything over $10,000 triggers it automatically. For $500,000, they freeze the account for at least 7 days under an AML review, anti-money laundering. If those sharks don't get cash by sunrise, they break down that door. And if the IRS sees Brandon suddenly receiving $500,000 with no documented source, they'll seize it for back taxes before he can pay anyone." Gregory's face paled. "So what do? We can't wait 7 days." "We make it look legitimate," I said. The lie tasted metallic and sharp. "We hide the asset. If the sharks check public records and see you own this house, they'll take the money and then force you to sign over the deed anyway. You need asset protection." I saw the calculation flash in Gregory's eyes. He wasn't thinking about Brandon. He was thinking about the house. "How?" "We transfer the title into a blind trust tonight. An anonymous LLC. I'll structure it as a corporate acquisition. The funds move instantly as a business transaction, bypassing personal holds. The sharks run a search and see you own nothing. You're judgment proof. Brandon pays them, and the house stays protected until things cool down." It was a web of financial jargon woven just tightly enough to sound real. They exchanged a glance. They didn't question me. They never cared enough to ask what I actually did for a living. They just knew I handled money. "Do it," Linda said, pushing the laptop toward me. "Fix this." I opened it. The blue light masked the truth in my eyes. I wasn't rescuing them. I was preparing the ground beneath their feet. Gregory hurried off to grab his laptop, footsteps heavy against the hardwood. He was fetching the very tool I would use against him. Alone with Linda, I looked around the dining room. Hand-cut Italian marble floors, custom wainscoting, a crystal chandelier worth more than my first car. I knew exactly how much it all cost, and exactly where the money came from. When I was 18, a semi-truck ran a red light and crushed my sedan. I spent 3 months in traction and had to learn to walk again before prom. The insurance settlement was $185,000. Pain and suffering, they called it. Linda held my hand when the check arrived. She said I was too young to manage that kind of money. She promised they would invest it safely until I was ready to buy a home or start a family. I believed her. I was 18. I was hurting. They were my parents. 2 months later, Brandon drove his truck through the front of a liquor store. He blew a .18. It should have meant prison. Instead, my parents suddenly had cash for the best criminal defense attorney in the state. Brandon got probation. The charges were expunged. When I asked about my investment account a year later, Linda said the market had crashed. She lied without blinking. I didn't know the truth then. I know it now. 3 years ago, after earning my certification, I traced every transfer. They drained my settlement to buy Brandon's freedom. It didn't stop there. While they renovated this house, installing marble floors and building a new wing, I was living in a basement apartment that smelled like mold and cat litter. I survived on instant noodles and double shifts because my college fund had vanished to cover Brandon's gambling losses in Vegas. They lived in luxury funded by my trauma. Taking this house wasn't theft. It was reimbursement, a debt collecting interest for 11 years. You're doing the right thing, Clara, Linda said softly. Family helps family. I know, I replied evenly. That's exactly what I'm doing. I was helping the only family member who mattered now. Me. Gregory returned, clutching his laptop. He shoved aside a dried floral centerpiece and opened the transfer portal. His hands shook as he typed his password, Brandon 888. Sweat rolled down his temple. I don't know, Linda, he muttered. Transferring the deed feels extreme. What if the trust never releases it? We need a lawyer. We don't have time, Linda snapped. Look at the window. He turned to me, suspicion finally surfacing. Why are you helping us, Clara? You never help. You hoard every cent. Why now? He sensed the trap, even if he couldn't see it. I started to answer, ready with more financial jargon, but Linda cut me off. The mask slipped. She lunged across the table and grabbed my wrist, her nails biting into my skin. She's helping because she has no choice, Linda hissed. You're going to walk your father through this right now. Or what? I asked quietly. You'll ground me? Her eyes hardened. Or I call 911. I tell them you're in the middle of a psychotic break. I tell them you're threatening self-harm. I mention the antidepressants you took in college. I say you're unstable, dangerous. The room felt colder. You wouldn't, I said, though I knew she would. I'll file for emergency conservatorship by morning, she whispered. I'll tell the court you're incompetent. A forensic auditor with a mental instability record. A 5150 hold. You'll lose your license, your clearance, your career. I will burn your life to save your brother. I looked at her, really looked. For years, I convinced myself they were flawed but loving. Now I saw the truth. There was no love in her eyes, only calculation. She was willing to dismantle my life to keep Brandon afloat. In that instant, the last grain of guilt evaporated. I didn't pull my wrist away. I let a slow, cold smile form. Not joy, recognition. You're right, Mom, I said evenly. Family comes first. Let's finish this. I turned to Gregory. Open the browser. I scheduled an emergency online notary under a corporate merger code. She's waiting. We have 10 minutes before the appointment expires. Linda let go of my wrist, a satisfied smile spreading across her face. She thought she had won. She believed she had intimidated me into backing down. She had no idea she had just signed her own eviction notice. I slowly opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the dimly lit room, casting long, sharp shadows across the marble table. I glanced at the time in the corner. 7:42 p.m. We have 18 minutes, I said, my fingers moving quickly over the keyboard. I called in a favor with a corporate notary service I use for hostile takeovers. I secured an emergency remote slot under a merger and acquisition code. She's in the digital waiting room right now. If we miss this window, the slot closes. The asset protection deal falls apart, and Brandon is left to handle it alone. It was a lie. A flawless, high-pressure lie carefully crafted to shut down their critical thinking. There was no merger code. It was simply a standard 24-hour notary service anyone could schedule for $50. But they didn't know that. All they felt was panic. Gregory wiped his forehead with his sleeve. What do we do? Sit here, I instructed, turning the laptop toward him. I've prepared a quitclaim deed. We are transferring the title of this property into a holding company called Veraritas Holdings, LLC. Veraritas. Linda narrowed her eyes at the screen. Who owns that? It's a blind trust shell, I replied, speaking quickly and confidently. It protects the asset. If the loan sharks run a title search tomorrow, they'll see the house was sold to a corporate entity. It will look like you liquidated. They can't place a lien on a property you no longer own. It essentially makes you judgment-proof while the money moves. And the taxes? Gregory asked, his voice shaking. He had always been terrified of the IRS. That's exactly why we're doing it this way, I said, leaning closer. If I simply hand you the check, it counts as a gift. You'd be hit with a 40% tax. But if we structure it as a corporate asset liquidity exchange, we avoid the gift tax threshold completely. It's called layering. It's how the ultra-wealthy protect their fortunes. They nodded. They didn't truly understand a word I said, but they nodded because they wanted to believe there was some clever solution that would fix everything. They were greedy, and greed makes people dangerously easy to mislead. The video call connected. A woman in a blazer appeared on the screen, looking mildly bored. Good evening. I have a deed transfer for signatures. Yes, I said. My clients are ready. Gregory hesitated. His hand hovered over the trackpad. For a brief moment, a flicker of survival instinct surfaced. Clara, this trust transfers the house back to us in 30 days, right? Once the sharks are paid? I looked directly into his eyes. I didn't blink. The contract follows the money, Dad. Once the debt is settled, the asset restores balance. It was technically true. The debt was the money they had taken from me. The balance was the house. He looked at me, then toward the window, as if he could see the invisible men in the black car waiting outside. Guilt narrows a person's vision. It doesn't make them foolish. It makes them afraid. They were so consumed by thoughts of loan sharks, scandal, and reputation that they failed to notice the real threat sitting across the table. They signed because they believed I was protecting them. It never crossed their minds that the daughter they had pushed around for 29 years had finally learned how to bite back. Sign it, Linda snapped. Gregory clicked. Digital signature. Accepted. Linda followed. Accepted. The notary applied the seal. The icon turned green. It's done. Gregory let out a long breath. The house is safe. Yes, I said quietly, closing the laptop. It is now. Linda extended her hand. Give me the check. I picked up the $500,000 check, the bait, and walked to the shredder. Grandpa always said, never write a check your integrity can't cash. I switched the machine on and fed the check into the blades. The silence that followed was suffocating. Gregory lunged at me, roaring with fury. I lifted my phone. I'm live streaming, I said evenly. Touch me, and this goes straight to the police. He stopped instantly. The anger drained from his face as if someone had pulled a plug. You lied, Linda whispered. You said the trust would give the house back. I said the contract follows the money, I replied. And it did. Veritas Holdings is mine. Veritas, Latin for truth. I calmly explained what they already understood deep down. The house had repaid the money they stole from my settlement, with interest. The debt was cleared. We'll sue you, Gregory shouted. Please do, I said. Explain to a judge how you signed a quitclaim deed to hide assets and dodge taxes. Silence fell heavy between us. You can fight the eviction, I continued, my hand resting on the door. Or you can be out by noon tomorrow. Otherwise, the forensic audit goes to the IRS and the DA. I left them standing there, small, cornered, and terrified. At 2:14 a.m., my phone buzzed with an alert. Motion detected. Brandon was breaking into my old apartment with a tire iron, searching for cash that didn't exist. Smile, I said through the app. You're on the cloud. I had sent him chasing nothing. He was still tearing at an empty vent when the police arrived. 30 days later, my parents were living in a motel. The house was sold. The money was secure. Grandpa slid a new check across the desk. $500,000 to start my own firm this time. My hand didn't tremble. I burned the bridge so the demons couldn't follow. If you've ever escaped a toxic family, you're not alone.